Sunday morning had a rhythm. Coffee brewed quietly, the toaster clicked, and sunlight cut through the blinds in neat stripes across the kitchen tile. I was half listening to the local radio playing low from the speaker on the fridge, flipping through a few work emails out of habit, not urgency. We weren't fighting. We weren't particularly close either. Just two people moving around each other like clockwork. She was barefoot, wearing one of those soft sweaters with the sleeves pulled over her hands, sitting at the kitchen island with a piece of toast and a spoon dipped in honey. She always pretended she didn't care about breakfast but lingered anyway. We'd fallen into these small, practiced routines. Then she set the spoon down with that specific kind of intentional care that always meant a performance was coming. She looked at me, not tentative, not apologetic, just ready. "I've been reading about open marriages," she said, like she was bringing up a new book club pick. "I think it would give us clarity." I remember exactly how she said it, like she was handing me a concept, not a confession. She used that word, clarity, as if it were a gift, not a knife. I didn't answer right away. I took another sip of coffee and watched a car pass slowly outside. The window caught my reflection just enough to make me feel like I was watching myself from somewhere else. Clarity. That's what she called it. I nodded slowly, like someone digesting a complex idea. But inside, something was twisting. Not anger. Not yet. Just the awareness that a decision had already been made, and I was being invited to nod along with it so she wouldn't have to feel guilty. "This isn't a crisis," she added, as if she'd rehearsed it. "It's a conversation. A way for both of us to grow. Think of it as a phase." Her voice had that measured, intellectual tone she used when trying to sound enlightened. It was the same voice she used when talking about meditation retreats or plant-based diets. Calm. Above reproach. I smiled faintly and asked if she wanted more coffee. She didn't notice the sarcasm buried in the question, or she chose not to. She kept talking about trust, about modern love, about how couples sometimes need distance to rediscover intimacy. I watched her gestures, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the way she avoided my eyes just a second too long when saying the word trust, and I listened, not just to what she said, but to what she avoided. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a retrofit. A new frame for something that had already been decided. That word again, clarity. She used it like a lighthouse, but I knew better. I could already feel the fog closing in. I didn't argue. Didn't ask who he was, because it was too soon for that. You don't make your move while you're still blindfolded. You wait until your hands are free. Instead, I played the part. Nodded. Smiled. Asked soft questions about boundaries and expectations. She responded like a professor, citing articles, podcasts, other evolved couples. It was all so prepared. After she left for her yoga class, I sat in that kitchen for an hour longer than I needed to, just listening to the silence, my hands wrapped around a cooling mug. I didn't cry, didn't shake. I just ran the conversation back in my head and realized something that hit harder than her words. She wasn't asking permission. She was covering her tracks. By the time I rinsed my cup and turned off the speaker, I had already decided I'd find out how long this phase had been running. And when I did, I wouldn't be asking for clarity. I'd be giving it. 3 weeks passed. She called it a transition period. I called it what it was, camouflage. The kind that buys time and softens exits. She said we should set rules, boundaries, emotional guardrails. Like this was some kind of workshop, not a marriage. I agreed to everything. Every boundary, every clause, every fake layer of mutual respect. She was careful at first, too careful. Then came the individual growth weekends, yoga retreats, girls' trips, silent meditation in the desert. Always framed as spiritual restoration, never pleasure. She wanted me to believe this was about enlightenment. But the thing about lies? They sweat. They leave fingerprints. It was a Sunday night when I found the first one. She'd left her iPad on the arm of the couch, screen still glowing. Normally I wouldn't touch it, but she'd gotten sloppy, or bold, or just indifferent. Maybe all three. The messages were inside a thread marked Coach Taylor. At first glance, it looked like something innocent, nutrition tips, travel plans. But then I read deeper. The tone shifted. So did the context. Jokes about hotel robes. References to specific wine bottles. One thread caught my breath mid-read. Next time let's not pretend to meditate after. Just stay in bed and order room service. I stared at the words like they belonged to someone else's life. Not mine. Not hers. But they were there, time-stamped, casual, real. Coach Taylor wasn't a coach. He was her alibi. The last message had come in just 2 hours earlier, while we'd been sitting on the back porch, watching the sun fall behind the neighbor's house, laughing about a squirrel stealing birdseed. She'd leaned her head on my shoulder while texting him from her wrist. It wasn't the affair that wrecked me first. It was the normalcy. The way she could still kiss me goodnight after texting a man she'd booked a hotel room with. The way she could still ask me to pick up oat milk on the way home. The duality of it was surgical. And yet, I didn't say anything. No confrontation. No betrayal scene in the living room. That would have been too easy for her. An outburst would make her the victim. No. She wanted the right kind of ending, one where I cracked, where she could sigh and say I was too emotional, too insecure for the evolved life she imagined. I wouldn't give her that. Instead, I screenshotted every message, saved them in a locked folder, started a backup protocol. I knew how to make tech obey, and I made it work for me. I watched her pack for her next weekend away. Upstate yoga retreat, she said with a smile. Minimal Wi-Fi, lots of journaling. I kissed her goodbye and waved from the porch like a man who didn't already know the Airbnb confirmation email came through at midnight. Not for upstate, for the city. Same boutique hotel as before. Same room number. When she left, I didn't follow her. I followed the trails she thought she'd erased. Shared banking apps. Uber records. Her calendar's metadata. Clues she didn't realize synced across our cloud accounts. I logged each one. Every rideshare route. Every dinner at restaurants I'd never heard her mention. Each time, the receipts matched the tone of the messages. Intimate. Routine. I started building the picture. Quietly. Cleanly. She came home glowing. Said the retreat was soul expanding. Said she'd written a poem about me. I watched her unpack. She folded her clothes like someone rewinding a film, trying to get back to the beginning. I asked her to read the poem. She laughed and said it was too personal. I laughed too. And when I turned away, I smiled for real, for the first time in weeks. Not because I was okay, but because the play had finally revealed its script. She hadn't asked to open our marriage. She'd asked to excuse it. And now that I knew, the end wouldn't come with shouting or tears. It would come when I said it would. By the fourth weekend, the pattern had stabilized. She left with the same canvas duffel, kissed me with the same soft urgency at the door, and texted me from the road with the same cheerful lies about traffic on the way to the woods. She always brought back trinkets, homemade herbal tea blends, hand-bound journals, tiny woven bracelets, proof of her authenticity. Artifacts of an imaginary retreat. I kept a spreadsheet. That wasn't poetry, but it was real. Dates, times, transaction records, rideshare drop-offs. I created a timeline so tight it could have been presented in court, and one day, it might be. She was consistent. Too consistent, like someone who'd rehearsed what guilt should look like and delivered it with a spiritual garnish. The calendar on her laptop synced to mine by accident. She forgot to turn off the setting after we planned a vacation 6 months ago. I never reminded her. She labeled her retreats as private, but the metadata told the truth. One entry read, Breast and Heel, 48 hours cleanse, but the actual calendar location? A boutique hotel in the West Village. I knew the address by heart now. I had the receipts to prove she'd never once gone north of 14th Street. I checked her text each time she left, using a local backup service that quietly mirrored her phone when it connected to home Wi-Fi. The thread with Coach Taylor had moved to encrypted messaging, but she slipped once. He sent her a public calendar invite by mistake. It popped up under massage therapy and included a reservation for 2 at a Japanese fusion restaurant. She told me that night she'd had a vegan cooking workshop. I nodded, asked if she'd made anything I should try. She said it didn't translate well. I almost laughed. I wasn't trying to catch her anymore. I was building a profile. The GPS logs were my final tool. Her car had a companion app. She used it mostly to preheat in winter, never realizing it also saved every route, every stop, every idle minute. One Friday night, she claimed to be deep in a silent meditation stretch. The log showed her car parked outside his condo for 4.5 hours. Engine off. No movement. She came back glowing again. Said she'd cried during a cacao ceremony. I listened. I nodded. I offered to try one together sometime. She smiled, slightly panicked, and said it wouldn't be the same. Too personal, she claimed. Too sacred. Of course it was. She kissed me goodnight and went to bed early, exhausted from her transformational weekend. I stayed up late, cataloging new data points. Each lie she told now sat neatly beside a time-stamped, verifiable contradiction. We still had dinner together 3 times a week. Still shared laundry duty. Still split the bills. But beneath that scaffolding, a second life ran parallel. Hers built on secrecy, mine built on precision. And somewhere in that dual life, I stopped feeling confused. I wasn't asking, why anymore? I didn't want her back. I didn't need some emotional reconciliation. What I wanted, what I was building, was leverage. Control doesn't come from emotion. It comes from information. The next Sunday, she made us pancakes. She added blueberries, said she felt reconnected after her retreat. She asked me to hold her hand at the table. I did. Because in that moment, she had no idea. No idea that I had already spoken to a financial advisor. No idea that I had already cloned her hard drive. No idea that the man she thought she was managing had stopped being manageable. She didn't know it yet, but this wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a countdown. The folder was named Wellness Docs, buried in her desktop, inside another folder labeled Retreat Resources. It was so on brand it almost made me admire the design. She had no idea I still had access. She'd forgotten our shared iCloud permissions linked our devices by default. Most people change passwords when they hide something. She changed her performance. The act was polished. But her files were not. That night she was at Moon Cycle Sound Therapy. I opened the folder. Expected more hotel confirmations, maybe gift receipts. Instead, I found her future. Drafts of separation paperwork. 4 versions. All titled with different dates. The language was meticulous. Mutual growth, irreconcilable personal values, emotional misalignment. There was nothing accidental about it. One version even included a paragraph about my insecurity with non-monogamous frameworks, and how the emotional strain created a volatile environment. She wasn't just preparing to leave. She was preparing to be the one left standing. And she wasn't doing it alone. In a separate folder were email threads with an attorney, mostly drafts forwarded to herself. Dates going back 2 months. One line stuck with me. A calm, phased transition would minimize disruption and maintain the moral high ground. Moral high ground. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark. Just me and the dull hum of a refrigerator I suddenly hated for how calmly it lived in this house. I wasn't sad. Not anymore. I was impressed. And then, I was focused. She wasn't preparing for honesty. She was preparing for optics. If I broke down, she'd win. If I lashed out, she'd be validated. If I walked away angry, she'd be the brave modern partner who took a risk and was punished for evolving. But I wasn't going to break. I was going to bend the narrative. Over the next 2 weeks, I built my case. I started with a financial firewall, quietly moved funds into a separate account I'd established before the marriage, one she had no legal claim to. Updated passwords, shifted bill payments into my name where possible, declined joint renewals. I met with a family lawyer under the pretense of estate planning, slid evidence across the table, didn't dramatize anything, just facts. Then I found the apartment. Small, modern, in a part of the city we never visited. I signed a lease under my name only, paid for 6 months upfront using untouched funds from a personal inheritance she'd forgotten I had. The realtor asked if I was downsizing for work. I said I was upgrading for peace. All of this happened while she floated through the house like a self-satisfied oracle. She'd taken up painting, left brushes soaking in mason jars on the windowsill. One night she poured me a glass of wine and said, "Don't you think we've handled this better than most couples?" I raised my glass. "Better than most," I said. She touched her glass to mine and smiled. She was already living in the story she was crafting for others, the one where she navigated modern love with grace and openness while I struggled with traditional expectations. She didn't know the ending had already been written, and it wasn't hers to tell. She used to say clarity was the greatest gift we could give each other. She was right. She just didn't know what it would look like when it finally arrived. The morning it happened, she made eggs. She hummed while she cooked, barefoot in her oversized sweater, moving like a woman who thought she'd won. There was peace in her shoulders, relaxed, open. She'd stopped pretending to be tense. She didn't see the suitcase by the bedroom door. She just finished telling me that "This is the healthiest phase we've ever had." That was her latest line, a mantra of self-deception. She said it while slicing avocado onto toast, as if the words were garnish. I watched her carefully position each slice, trying to make it look effortless. She always did that, presentation over truth. I didn't respond. I took one last look at the kitchen I'd installed myself 3 years ago. The tile backsplash she never noticed. The stool I'd fixed twice. The framed photo of us from that trip to Sedona, when I still believed silence meant peace, not avoidance. I reached for my keys. She looked up mid-bite. "Where are you going?" I smiled. Calm. Gentle. Like I was stepping out for groceries. Forward. That was it. No argument. No cruel declarations. No names thrown across the table. Just that one word, and the sound of the door closing behind me. My apartment was waiting. White walls, no memories. The lease had been signed 2 weeks earlier. Furniture delivered last Friday. Utilities turned on under my name. The fridge already stocked with the essentials. Everything I needed to start clean. She didn't call right away. That would have broken her illusion of control. Instead, she sent a message that evening. "Are you staying at Mike's?" I didn't answer. The next day. "Can we talk? You left so abruptly. I just want to understand." Still nothing. By day 3 she cracked. "You didn't even try to hold on to us." That was when I replied. "You asked for clarity. This is it." No threats. No accusations. Just a mirror, held up with surgical precision. The silence after that was beautiful. 2 days later, she showed up at the new apartment. She must have tracked my billing address or checked my location history. She was always tech-savvy when it served her. She knocked. I watched through the peephole as she stood there, trying to compose herself. Hair perfect, clothes soft and casual, like she wanted to look vulnerable but still empowered. The uniform of someone who needed the breakup to look mutual. I didn't open the door. She knocked again, waited 5 minutes, then left without a word. Later that night, a text came in. "We could have handled this like adults." I almost laughed, because I had. Handling it like an adult doesn't mean talking until your voice gives out. It means walking out before your soul does. Words spread quickly. I told only 2 people, trusted ones, neutral and discreet. But it was enough. She'd underestimated how many people still valued restraint over spectacle. Her story didn't land the way she expected. Her partner faded fast. He was never going to be a real option. Just a mirror for her own ego. A fantasy that disappeared the second it required accountability. He stopped showing up at the hotel. Disappeared from the thread. Probably had someone else's wife to whisper to. By the end of that week, she was alone. And for the first time in months, so was I. But not broken. Not emptied. Just clear. She didn't unravel immediately. She tried to manage the optics first. 2 days after I left, she posted a photo of a candlelit dinner for one, captioned with something about solitude as self-love. I recognized the dish. It was from the restaurant he'd taken her to. That same garnish, that same square white plate. She'd ordered it for herself this time, trying to reclaim something, trying to rebrand the betrayal as empowerment. I didn't respond, didn't correct the narrative. I didn't need to. Mutual friends started reaching out, quietly, cautiously. The ones who knew better. The ones who'd watched her change tone over the last few months but hadn't known how to name it. I never asked them to choose sides. I didn't need sides. I had the truth. She kept reaching out. Her text shifted tones like weather patterns. Some soft and wistful. "I just miss our morning coffee." Some desperate. "You don't get to disappear and say nothing." And some angry. "You abandoned me without a real conversation." But I had said everything that needed to be said. With actions. With silence. With documents already filed and timestamps already recorded. The day she showed up at my building again, the doorman called. I told him I wasn't available. She waited in the lobby for half an hour, eventually left. The next day, I got an email. Subject: closure. She wrote about how she never intended to hurt me, how her heart was confused, how she thought we were evolving. She said she thought we could grow apart without falling apart, that she didn't realize I'd been drifting emotionally, until it was too late. She was still trying to write both sides of the story, still trying to claim authorship. I let the email sit. That week, my lawyer submitted the formal filing. Attached were digital logs, texts, financial records, travel confirmations. Not for revenge. Not for spectacle. For protection. For truth, her attorney reached out 2 days later with a desire to resolve things peacefully. Of course they did. She had assumed I'd flail, that I'd resist, that I'd make it messy and emotional. Instead, I handed them a folder that didn't need interpretation, only signatures. And when the legal lines were finally drawn, she tried one last tactic. She called my mother. Said she was worried about me. That I was withdrawing, closing off. She asked if she could come over and talk. My mother, gracious to the bone, told her I was doing just fine. She never called again. By then, her online persona had shifted from open-hearted explorer to wounded woman navigating modern heartbreak. She joined forums, started commenting on posts about betrayal and spiritual closure. She wanted the identity of the wrong. But the story didn't stick. The silence was louder than anything she could post. The man she tried to manage had left quietly, methodically. And when he left, he took the narrative with him. That was the reckoning. Not rage. Not collapse. Just the reality she could no longer cure it. The divorce went through in 92 days. No courtroom drama. No screaming matches. Just a clean, silent split that left everything in place, except her illusions. The evidence made things efficient. My lawyer said it was the most peaceful one-sided split she'd seen in 5 years. We kept the house sale private. I didn't push for anything I couldn't justify. Just what I'd built, protected, and prepared to reclaim. She fought over the guest car. The irony didn't escape me. She'd used that car more to visit him than to visit me, but she clung to it like it carried meaning. I let her have it. Let her win the empty things. The apartment I'd moved into felt like a holding cell at first. White walls, no echoes, too much air. But slowly it became mine. Not because I decorated it, but because no one lied in it. There were no private calendar entries, no unspoken agendas. Just space. I heard from her again, but not directly. A mutual acquaintance forwarded me a blog post, anonymously written, but it didn't take a forensic linguist to spot the author. She'd found a new identity, the left-behind seeker. The article was titled, "When They Walk Out Without Warning." She described the exit as sudden, devastating, unprocessed. She left out the part about hotel rooms, encrypted messages, and separation drafts dated before the clarity conversation. That was her story now. The man who abandoned her because he couldn't handle the light. Let her have it. Truth doesn't need to chase applause. The fallout reached further than I expected. A couple we'd vacationed with cut contact with her. Another old friend called me and said, "I thought something was off. I just didn't know how far it had gone." What struck me wasn't their support. It was how none of them seemed surprised, as if she'd already been preparing them too, softening the ground, casting me as rigid, difficult, too old school for the new world of love. But narratives need symmetry, and hers fell apart the moment I didn't fight. That silence she feared? That was my clarity. Months passed. She sent a letter in spring, handwritten, 4 pages, folded carefully like a college apology. She said she'd started therapy, that she was deconstructing her patterns, that she still believed I was the most grounded person she'd ever known. She ended it with, "I hope one day we can talk again. Not to fix anything, just to understand it." I didn't respond, not because I hated her, because there was nothing left to understand. When you watch someone walk into a mess they created, you don't follow them to explain the forecast. You move towards sunlight. The final scene wasn't dramatic. No late-night calls, no tearful doorstep reunions. Just a Tuesday morning in a city I hadn't lived in before. I sat in a small coffee shop, watching people move past the windows. I wasn't healed, not entirely. But I was whole. The kind of whole that doesn't look impressive. It just stands. She'd wanted to open something she could control. What she opened instead was a door. And the man who stepped through it, he wasn't coming back.